I'd like to welcome our visitors here and say that we'd be glad to chat for a minute after this press availability is over. Just met with EPA Administrator Pruitt, and we had a very productive, very cordial conversation. We talked about the EPA budget as it affects the grants to the state, and very pleased to see that the House Appropriations Committee restored most of that funding, and in particular the Upper Great Lakes restoration, which vitally affects the St. Louis River and Duluth project. Has been that funding's been restored. I see Commissioner Stein hovering in the background here, who should be up here, but he's extremely knowledgeable. I was just so impressed with his level of detail, and of course he heads the national organization, so he brings that national perspective as well. So we had a good meeting, and that I'll open it up to questions on that or any other subject.
Did Mr. Pruitt say that he agrees with the House? Did he say that after the Trump budget zeroed out Great Lakes funding, did he say he supports?
I didn't ask him that question. I don't think it's fair to ask. If you're a secretary, like a commissioner, you take the position of your chief executive, and I didn't ask him that.
Did he indicate that he'd be willing to spend it?
Every indication that he would spend it, yes. I didn't ask him that specific question either, but no indication to otherwise.
Governor, do you have any comment on the shooting by the officer?
It's a horrible tragedy, and I've placed a call to Mr. Damond, as well as to the Australian consulate in Chicago. I'll have to call back numbers, but I'm not going to be involved in the investigation. I'm aware that Bureau of Criminal Apprehension is giving it its absolute top priority, and I think they provided yesterday afternoon to all of you and to me, really, the information that they believe they can provide at this point in time.
Aside from your call to the consulate, have you had any other initiated or received any direct contact with Australian governmental sources about this?
Been working through Chief of Staff Jamie Tincher. She's been in touch with the White House government relations officials, and they directed her to a State Department official. We withheld any activity on our part here until we talked with them and understood what the protocol is in terms of state government and a federal, for another country. So that's been that took a day or so to make those connections, and that's but we wanted to make sure we handled this properly.
Governor, you said you called her father. Can you tell us anything about that?
I called her fiance.
Fiance. Can you tell us anything about that?
I left a voicemail. I got a voicemail. I left a message expressing what I've just said, my deepest condolences, and offered to provide whatever assistance I could.
Governor John wrote in a column that any system that gives officers discretion on when or whether to turn on body cameras is useless and a waste of money. Do you agree with that, and do you think the state should step in on policy regarding the use of body cameras?
I don't. I think we should look at that policy. I think in light of this experience, it definitely should be reviewed by the legislature. I haven't looked at it with enough time to take a position on it, but I would agree with what County Attorney Mike Freeman said, that they didn't have to turn them on, but they should have had them on. And I assume that reflects his understanding of what City of Minneapolis or Minneapolis Police Department policy is. It's with the local control over law enforcement that we have in Minnesota, those decisions in terms of the protocol and the use of body cameras, as well as when they must be turned on and when they should be turned on at all, resides with the local authorities, the City of Minneapolis and the Minneapolis Police Department. But I think it's something the legislature certainly should want to take a look at next year, and I'll work with them.
Governor, the legislature has wrestled with this and not been able to come up with a statewide solution. Do you think that is required rather than a city-by-city, jurisdiction-by-jurisdiction policy?
I'm not prepared today to say one way or the other, but I would certainly look at that question before the next legislative session.
Governor, do you believe there is a double standard in how
What are you implying is the double standard?
Well, I'm not, when Orlando Castillo was shot, you said if he had been white, it would have been different.
Well, I'm not going to comment on that. I mean, each situation is different. That was a comment I made with regard to that particular incident. I don't even know how to apply that to this. And, we don't have, I mean, there's such a paucity of information, which is very unfortunate. But, best of my knowledge, there are only 2 living eyewitnesses, one of whom spoke yesterday to BCA officials for a total about 4 hours, and the other has declined to be interviewed, and obviously he's the key person in this investigation. So I mean, I just I don't know any more than whatever has been reported.
Governor, can you weigh in that this has nothing to do with the Somali community? This is a Yaros police officer. Somalis are law-abiding citizens in this state. This is an isolated incident. It had just happened to be a Somali officer. That doesn't mean that the Somali community has to explain themselves. He's a police officer, member of the Minneapolis Police Department. Somalis has nothing to do with this. Somalis have a concern with the way the police deals with them. We express deep condolence to the loved ones of this case, and we also demand answers what happened and why the shooting took place. We have the same concern like the family, like any other citizen in the street of this state, and we don't have to explain ourselves that because the officer just happened to be a Somali officer.
I would agree. I don't think there should be any implication to the broader Somali community or communities in Minnesota because of this incident. It was a single incident involving a single officer, 2 officers, one who fired, reportedly is one who fired his weapon, and that should be viewed as its own separate from anything else. As I said at the time about Mr. Castillo, that was, again, it was not my comments were not in any way a statement on law enforcement generally or on any community. It was directed toward that specific incident, and I certainly would want to emphasize that as well in this regard.
Governor, are you as frustrated as everybody else by the lack of information in this case and how many days it's taken to learn much of what happened?
Well, the BCA was on the site immediately, and they are taking whatever, I'm not an expert, whatever forensic evidence and other evidence available. There was, in marked contrast to the Mr. Castillo's shooting where there was video cameras and dash cams and others, so there was a lot of information quickly available. There just has not been, whatever the determination they've made and forensic evaluations about various aspects of the event are confidential. But without one of the law enforcement officers being willing to talk about what happened, I think BCA itself, I'm just speculating here, is also stymied by the lack of available information. They put out a call for any witnesses. To my knowledge, when I've been told, there's no known other witnesses to the event. So I think everybody's very wants answers that are not immediately forthcoming, and I don't know when they will be forthcoming.
Officer Noor has exercised his right to not subject himself to an interview yet. As a public servant, as a police officer, should he?
I'm not going to comment on that. He's entitled to make that decision, and he has constitutional rights as well as state law that protects his decision to speak or not speak. So I'm not going to comment on that.
Are you concerned with the spate of shootings of police officers, shooting by police officers and civilians? If you are in Minnesota, and if you are, what are those?
Well, I'm certainly concerned. I'm concerned with any one incident is one far too many. And it underscores the importance of the training the funds that the legislature provided, that the post board is going to be administering. And, I would defer to others with more expertise than I what can possibly be done to prevent this from happening and ever happening again, recognizing that these are individual law enforcement officers. There are thousands of them patrolling the state every moment, day and night, and they are put into these situations that are very incident specific, and they're having to make very quick, if not instantaneous, decisions about how they're going to proceed. And so it's to say you're going to have a blanket training program or any other program that's going to encompass all of that and give people that whatever additional level of training or expertise they need to make different decisions in that split second are ones that we certainly will pursue. But it's just realistically, we can do the best we can, but we're not going to make human beings perfect.
Do you worry that the paucity of information and the dribbling of the information and the way it's come out, in fact, even the way the BCA put out its first release, pointing to a person who, upon questioning, knew nothing of the case, is going to fuel skepticism and actually fear the police department? Are you concerned about that?
I'm not aware that the person who was identified by the BCA was ignorant about the case. I don't know. I don't have any information. First I've heard of that. I don't know. I'll certainly check with Commissioner Damond and see that they have whoever is going to be making whatever statements is as well informed as can be. Again, I'm just saying, and I'm not privy to the BCA, but the paucity of information here. Available information, you've got whatever physical evidence and whatever, ballistic or other tests that they can perform, which they're going to undertake with the greatest urgency. But there are only two people who are alive who witnessed the incident, and the BCA was prepared to interview the first officer the next morning or as soon as possible thereafter, and he took until yesterday morning before he and through his attorney agreed to be interviewed, and that interview was extensive, over 4 hours, I'm told. And the BCA, it can't compel the other testimony. So, I think the BCA is doing all it can as rapidly as it can, and there just is not very much other information or evidence available to them. Now, they'll have to, I'm not, again, qualified to say what else they're looking into. But they'll certainly complete that work as soon as they possibly can and provide that information to the Hennepin County Attorney, which is what they're required to do.
How worried are you now that we've had Mark, we've had Monica Steele, now this Damon? How worried are you about the image of this state, which others see as not across the United States but across the world?
Well, I have deep regrets anytime I see Minnesota portrayed in less than a very positive light, which I think is what we deserve and have earned and what we want our image to be. So it's very concerning in this case. My greatest concern is for the individual who, Justine Damond, and for her family who have suffered this grievous loss. And that's the overriding concern I have.
Governor, last night a lot of media from Australia and across the world had asked the Assistant Police Chief and Mayor if our Minnesota policing system is trigger happy. And after these high-profile officers all shoot in, what can we do as a state to look at this issue that some think is systemic?
Well, again, that's where I think this training program is so important, is both looking at it, but is also asking people with that training expertise what is most successful in terms of giving officers that perspective that they need to make split-second decisions and to make them be the right decisions. I don't think trigger happy is an appropriate term to apply to Minnesota law enforcement. And again, we're all dependent on them to be patrolling every minute of every day and night to keep us safe, and they encounter all sorts of really extremely difficult situations. And I think 99.99% of the time, they conduct themselves admirably and with restraint and with the caution they recognize, too, the power that they have and the authority they have.
Chairman, with respect to witnesses, the DCA statement last night said that there was a bicyclist who stopped and saw part of the incident, and they're calling for us to forward. Would you use this platform?
Certainly ask anybody who has any knowledge that was present at the site or saw anything related to the site. I urge them, ask them to please come forward and share that information with the BCA. That would be a vital, important contribution to what I'm told is that they, saw a bicyclist and then saw him again after the shot was fired and the Mrs. Damond was on the pavement, and not they don't believe a video of the incident itself. But whatever they have, whatever anybody has, we certainly deeply appreciate receiving.
Governor, would you clarify for us once again what contacts you had with the BCA on this and what you've learned from them?
Well, I've been in contact with Commissioner Damond, who notified the Chief of Staff, myself, within minutes on Saturday night. It was early Sunday morning. By then, I've had numerous conversations. I've had two different face-to-face meetings with her. We have updated on the situation. We've been in frequent contact. My Chief of Staff has been in very frequent contact with her and the BCA officials. So we're closely involved and closely advised.
Have you directed them to make this a priority?
To make it an absolute first priority, yes, I certainly have, and they are doing so without my urging. They recognize the urgency of the situation. They recognize the enormous desire on everyone's part to be informed about what information is available. So they are giving this their absolute top priority.
And you've urged them to release information as quickly as possible?
I've urged them to do what they normally do in an instance like this, that is both as responsive as possible to the desire for information, and that also protects the integrity of the investigation and protects whatever or honors whatever laws or regulations that are applicable that guide what can and can't be done, what can and can't be said, and to whom and when. But the overriding effort, and they are very cognizant of this, is to provide what information is available that can be shared as quickly as possible and proceed as quickly as possible.
Governor, you said you spoke to the Australian consulate.
I left a message.
You left a message on voicemail or?
I spoke there to a receptionist or an executive assistant. I didn't get her name, but I spoke to a person there.
And what was the message?
I said that I was governor of Minnesota, and given the incident that happened, I wanted to just offer whatever support or assistance I could. And again, Chief of Staff's been in touch with the contact the White House gave us to the secretary at the U.S. State Department about the protocol and the like, and she's been in conversation with Minneapolis city authorities and the Hennepin County authorities regarding what information, certain protocols for how certain information needs to be communicated, what needs to transpire in order for it to be officially received, communication and the like. So we've been trying to learn and then follow that protocol, but be as forthcoming as we can be. And we will continue to be.
Have I talked to Mayor Hodges?
I've not spoken with her, no. My Chief of Staff again has talked with her top deputy on a frequent basis.
Any other questions?
Yeah, if I may just change subjects. Eric Hardell has filed a second suit trying to intervene in the governor versus legislative suit, trying to get them to overturn the stipulation and to fill the plaintiff's case. The question that he raised in an interview was, why go through this process of the stipulation of getting funding through the courts rather than going through the legislative process? Why use that process rather than the normal process?
Well, because I didn't fund the House and the Senate, and the legislative session was over, and they have not agreed to return to discuss the issues that I set forth, and so we haven't had a special session. So legally, constitutionally, the other alternative for them to be funded for their essential services is through the district court judge. That's the procedure we followed in 2011 when the executive branch shut down. We had the district court judge through his magistrate make those allocation decisions, and that's been established procedure as far as I know. I'm not a constitutional expert, and I'm not a lawyer. As far as I know, that's an established practice in these instances in Minnesota.
The United States Senate has failed to vote to repeal Obamacare, twice as they have said they would. President Trump says he's going to allow it to die. Could I get your reaction to the non-vote and then the, I guess, suggestion that it's going to wither? And what effect it will have on Minnesota?
Well, I was surprised that the Republican leadership and majority in the U.S. House of Representatives didn't recognize the catastrophic effect that this legislation would have on so many Minnesotans and other Americans, and they coupled it with a reduction in taxes for the very wealthiest Americans. I mean, the CBO's estimate 26 million Americans were going to lose their health insurance over the following decade. I mean, it should have been enough to turn anybody's vote around on that. So in the Senate, the Democrats, 48 Democrats stood in shoulder to shoulder and said the measures that had been proposed by the Senate Majority Leader, Senator McConnell, were as bad, if not worse, than the House bill. And enough Republican senators agreed with them to thwart legislation passing in order to have Obamacare eliminated without any replacement, which it's one thing to criticize from the sidelines, and it's another thing to then have to take responsibility and create something better, implement it, which they've proven incapable of doing. I'm glad the bill failed. Again, it would have had catastrophic effects on Minnesota. When it took effect, it would be very destabilizing until it took effect. And that's why governors from both parties, our National Governors Association last weekend, Democrats were very outspoken. Republicans were more restrained, but Republican governors, many of the ones I talked with, had the same concerns that Democratic governors had in terms of the very negative impact on their states.
Governor, back to the Minneapolis shooting situation for a moment. As you reflected on this, and I'm sure you have, do you think these three high-profile cases, Steele, Mark Clark, and now Damond, are they unfortunate, tragic, coincidental series of events, or are they indicative of the fact that Minnesota law enforcement needs better training?
Well, I think most Minnesota law enforcement is very well trained and conducts itself very responsibly in ever increasingly difficult situations in our cities and across the state. To draw conclusions from three incidents, tragic as they are, requires somebody to really do a more careful analysis than I've been able to do. If there are conclusions that can be made, and there's any shortcomings that become established, then we certainly look at that. And again, the overall training component of the legislature approved for law enforcement statewide will again focus on and it will be different from one community to another, but focus on what they identify as areas that need to be strengthened. So, but to say that cast a blanket judgment across the state, I think is not supported by the information so far in these three instances.
Back to health care, with what has not happened in Washington, what's that mean for individual market here?
Well, we did a tremendous amount to shore up the individual market in Minnesota. The premium rebate, the 25%, has been very effective. It has not reached as many people. The belief is that not as many people are signing up for that care. which is its own commentary that's concerning. But the program itself is being administered well and is providing, from everything I'm told, relief to those Minnesotans who certainly need it and deserve it. The reinsurance, what they're talking about doing in Washington now, just preliminarily, about working together in a bipartisan way to correct some of the deficiencies in the Affordable Care Act and stabilize the individual insurance market. What they keep coming back to is reinsurance, which is exactly what we instituted at the state level. And I met last week with Secretary Price and the CMS Administrator Verman about approving as rapidly as possible the Minnesota waiver, which was the last green light we need to move the Minnesota program for the next 2 years. So I think we're on the cutting edge of what governments are doing at this point to try to improve that market stability. But it's expensive. I mean, we spent $870 million among those 2 years of the reinsurance and then the premium relief. We allocated that amount of money. I don't know if we'll end up spending it all, but it's very expensive, and it's not something the state can afford to continue on an ongoing basis. So the federal government step in and provide significant resources to do what's necessary to stabilize the individual market is crucial. And I think there should be a bipartisan approach, which the Republicans in Congress have totally rejected up until this point, and the president's rejected. But hopefully at this point, it's not about letting Obamacare die. That would be unconscionable and have devastating, life-threatening effects for thousands of Minnesotans. It's about working together and saying what's best for the people of Minnesota, what's best for the people of this country. How can we make this existing program, which from all accounts is going to continue to be in place for the foreseeable future, how can we improve it for the benefit of Americans?
Do you expect more policies to be available next year?
More
Policies, more health insurance policies.
I don't. I believe all the existing insurers. I don't know for a fact, but I believe that they're all likely to stay in the market, so there'll be the same options. But I don't know that for a fact, and I haven't seen the details of it. And then of course what rates they set is a crucial factor. And when we know that, they have to submit to file with the Commissioner of Commerce by July 31st, and their public information on August 1st. And then we all, myself included, will have factual information which really assess the state of the individual market here in Minnesota and what, if anything, needs to be done further.
If Senator McConnell is successful and manages to repeal Obamacare with a plan to replace perhaps 2 years down the line, what would be your greatest concern if that approach were to succeed?
Well, it would be what they're going to do in terms of pushing people away from the individual market, given the uncertainty factor, pushing insurers away from participation, which has already happened to some extent in other states because of the uncertainty of what would be taking effect in 2 years, as well as the reductions in Medicaid. I mean, there's some talk where they would roll back Medicaid expansion immediately. That would be devastating for Minnesotans and people across the country. And even if they postpone that for 2 years, it would still put, again, a great deal of uncertainty, inject a great deal of uncertainty. This program, all the national health care programs need more assurance, more stability, more better certainty for the insurers, for the health care providers, and for the recipients of health care in this country as to what the ground rules are going to be and who's going to pay for what, and so they can proceed at times of great trauma in their lives with as little external fear injected into their lives. And so Congress has a real responsibility to come together and work out the ground rules and procedures and programs for the foreseeable future, given their inability to do something even that would take effect 2-3 years from now. Okay? We talked about the waters of the United States, which Commissioner Stein can speak better than I, what we consider in its form adopted by the last administration to be an overreach. and that we need clearer boundaries of what is going to qualify or not qualify for waters of the United States, and clear authority for states to direct their own. We have a great MPCA organization and a terrific commissioner, and we have environmental laws that have been passed on a bipartisan basis for over 40 years, and we are very confident of our ability to uphold the highest standards in both Minnesota and are also model for the nation in so many of these areas. So we don't believe that we need to be micromanaged by Region 5 in Chicago. We don't believe that every decision that MPCA makes should be reviewed subsequently. It takes a lot of time, it takes energy, it costs time for people wanting to proceed with these projects. We have a great deal of confidence, and I think the record supports this, that Minnesota can meet and in many cases surpass the environmental standards that Congress has set for the country, and we intend to continue to do so. And as Commissioner Stein said, we want to establish a collaborative and cooperative relationship with the federal EPA.